They thought humanity was extinct. But a single warship, reborn in darkness, tore through their empire like a myth come alive. Layla Monroe didn't just lead a resistance, she became the voice of vengeance. The Dominion collapsed not from force, but from fear. And now the stars whisper one truth: humanity is what comes after the fire. Stay with us to find out how this legend ends, and don't forget to subscribe. The galaxy had known war, endless, systematic, bureaucratic war. But nothing like what was coming. It began not with a declaration, but a ripple. A gravitational echo from the edges of the Elysian Drift, Sector 17B, a place so hostile, so violently unstable, even smugglers whispered curses before skirting past it. No patrols. No trade lanes. Only death waited in that black. Which is why the signal didn't make sense. The Zarn Dominion had locked that sector down for decades. Probes that went and never came back. Surveillance grids returned static. So when the anomaly pinged a confirmed mass displacement, equivalent to a Class C battlecruiser, the Zarn didn't laugh. They held their breath. Commander Threll's long, eel-like fingers twitched as he studied the distortion from the central observation core of the Dominion flagship Cray. Run it again. The technician obeyed, tapping crystalline control nodes embedded in the floor. Confirmed. Something is moving straight toward us. And it's big. Threll's slitted eyes narrowed. That's void space. No friendly fleets. No relay gates. No exit points. That's unknown contact, the technician finished. The moment the words were spoken, the entire Cray lurched into red alert. Fighters launched from dorsal bays. Shield matrices rotated into full alignment. 6 Dreadnought-class graviton lances powered up and swiveled to cover the breach vector. A flicker. Then a shadow. And the distortion peeled back like water parting. The bridge fell silent. It wasn't organic. It wasn't anything in the Dominion database. It was angular. Brutal. Forged, not built. Matte black hull scarred from countless battles, its surface rippling with radiation scoring. And etched into its prow, burned into the plating with molten precision, were 3 words, written in human standard. UCHS Revenant. A human warship. Alive. Moving. In Dominion space. Lord Vacheron, the Dominion's high strategist, appeared on the central viewing display. His ceremonial kitten armor glinted cold silver. This is impossible, he hissed, voice like razors dragged across obsidian. Humanity was crushed during the Cradle Siege. Their kind is extinct. A junior officer's voice cracked. Then why is that ship locking targeting systems? Before anyone could answer, the Revenant's side panels flared open, unveiling a grotesque arsenal, oversized railguns, plasma lances thrumming with unstable energy, torpedo banks, and something new, something glowing deep red, pulsing like the heart of a star. On board the Revenant, Captain Layla Monroe stood at the edge of her command deck, arms behind her back, spine unbowed. Neural implants flickered faintly at her temples. Her crew, silent, deadly, moved like one organism, no orders needed. They've locked sensors, her tactical officer noted. Layla smiled, small and cold. Good. Let them look. Let them remember. She gave a nod. The Revenant fired. The first volley tore a Dominion frigate in half, no shields, no evasive maneuvers, just metal split like bone. The second barrage reduced a destroyer into radioactive ash. The Zarn had prepared for calculated war. Strategic war. Not this. The Revenant moved like a predator, not a ship. It dodged incoming fire before it was launched, jamming comms, vanishing from radar, reappearing where it shouldn't be. Each kill was surgical, monstrous. A hunter in a slaughterhouse. Inside the Cray, chaos bloomed. This can't be real. Threll screamed, his voice cracking as Klaxon screamed. Lord Vacheron's claws flexed against his armrest. We underestimated them, he murmured. On the Revenant, Layla watched the unfolding massacre with clinical calm. The Zarn had glassed Earth, poisoned its oceans, hunted humanity across a dozen systems. And they thought that was the end. They forgot what happens when you drive prey too far. Humanity didn't vanish. It evolved. Prepare the Trinity cannon, Layla ordered. The bridge darkened as the central power core groaned. The weapon began to wake. The Dominion scanners registered energy readings so high, even their war AI flagged the signal as fabric integrity hazard. Power levels that didn't mean victory. They meant message. The Revenant wasn't here to win. It was here to be seen. Inside the Cray, alarm shrieked. Vacheron's officers shouted over each other, demanding more power, backup formations, anything to stop what was coming. But it was too late. The Revenant didn't dodge. It charged. Fire trailed from its flanks, sections of hull plating peeled off under pressure, but it kept moving. Straight through the Dominion line, leaving burning wrecks in its wake. Target the command ship, Layla said. I want Vacheron to watch. Chief Engineer Voss looked up from the main conduit console, his hands scorched. That thing's gonna rip a hole through time if we overcharge again. Good, Layla said. Maybe the past needs to see the future. The Trinity cannon, built in exile, never tested, pulsed like a dying sun. No safety systems. No off switch. Just a single purpose, erase. On the Cray, Lord Vacheron rose to his feet. Get me the human. Moments later, a flickering comm window appeared. Layla Monroe stared back. A ghost. You were at the siege of Jupiter, Vacheron spat. She nodded. And I made you a promise. The Zarn commander sneered. I said I'd come back. Her voice turned low. And I'd bring hell. She cut the transmission. And then the Revenant fired. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't an explosion. It was a rupture. Space bent. Time cracked. Ships folded into themselves, twisted like wet paper in a firestorm. The Kree, pride of the Dominion fleet, vanished, not destroyed, but erased. The remaining Zarn ships fled in all directions. The Revenant drifted among the wreckage, hull bleeding plasma, systems buckling. But it stood. Inside, Layla stood straighter. Damage report? Trinity core unstable. 2 more shots maybe. Hull integrity, barely functional. Layla looked at her crew. Then we're just getting started. The Dominion had built its empire on absolute control, military might, psychological warfare, strategic terror. Every colony it absorbed, every race it subdued, all bent not just under firepower, but under the weight of certainty. The Zarn didn't just fight wars. They ended possibilities. And yet, in less than an hour, one ship had burned that certainty alive. The Revenant had torn a hole through one of the most fortified sectors in Zarn space. Now, across the galactic network, silence pulsed from Dominion broadcasters. The usual propaganda extinction of humanity, dominion of peace, order, and obedience, was replaced by static, then whispers. A ghost ship. A black blade in the void. A human warship. On board the Revenant, there was no celebration. No victory speeches. The crew moved like they were underwater, exhaustion weighing down their limbs. Oxygen levels were low on 3 decks. Hull breaches hissed behind emergency force fields. The Trinity core was overheating in its containment chamber, and the backup reactor was humming at the wrong frequency. But no one spoke of retreat. They weren't fighting a war. They were finishing one. Layla Monroe stood alone near the viewport, staring into the starless horizon ahead. Her coat, black, frayed, half of the Earth's patch scorched away, fluttered lightly from the failing circulation fans. A symbol of a world that no longer existed, but not one that had been forgotten. Ahead lay Calvaris Prime, the Dominion's largest shipyard. Orbiting a gas giant whose rings shimmered with raw ore, Calvaris produced nearly 60% of the Zarn's naval force. It was the black heart of their war machine. Take it out, and the Dominion wouldn't just bleed. It would stop healing. But this wasn't a soft target. 12 orbital war stations. 3 destroyer groups. A planet-killer AI system embedded into the ring's infrastructure, one that had, by itself, once annihilated a pirate armada in 49 minutes. And still, Layla wanted to go through the front door. Beside her, Voss ran his hand through soot-caked hair. You know this is suicide, right? Probably. We get in, we can't jump out. It'll trap us in system. I know. He looked at her then. Really looked. Then why? She turned. Her voice was calm, but it struck like iron. Because they think we won't. That was the thing, wasn't it? The Zarn calculated. They wargamed. They used probability engines and logic trees. They assumed their enemies would fight to survive. Humanity fought to remember, to punish, to return. She gathered the crew around the hollow table. No ranks, no formalities. The bridge crew, the gunners, the engineers, all gathered. Not soldiers. Not anymore. Just survivors. We hit Sector 8, she said, pointing at a high-density node of overlapping defense grids. That's their strongest point. Torres, the gunner, noted. Exactly. They'll never expect a direct strike. She laid out the plan. A decoy drone, rigged to simulate a hyperspace malfunction, would draw 2 of the destroyers off course. They'd hit the command nodes with everything they had. No stealth. No subversion. Just fury. And the Trinity? Someone asked. Layla didn't blink. We save it. For the core reactor. There were no cheers. Just nods. Faces tight with grief. With memory. They weren't here to win. They were here to be seen. 12 hours later, the Revenant dropped into Calvaris orbit. The sky exploded. Defense satellites lit up like fireflies in a storm. Plasma beams clawed at the hull. The decoy drone spun erratically, flaming and trailing sparks. Just as planned, 2 destroyers peeled off pursuit. Then the Revenant surged forward. Through the defense ring. Through fire. Through death. Railguns boomed. Plasma scorched the void. Shattered orbital drones became shrapnel. The Dominion fired everything. The sky became an engine of annihilation. And still, the Revenant moved. She lost Deck 3. Hull rupture. 2 crew gone. A railgun exploded mid-fire, taking a third of its station with it. But still, they kept going. Layla's voice cut through the smoke and screaming consoles. Keep moving. Get me to the core. No orders needed. They knew the price. They welcomed it. The Trinity cannon began to charge. By the time the Revenant breached the reactor ring, the sky above Calvaris was on fire. Fire the Trinity, Layla said. The second blast of the Trinity cannon lit the orbit like a sun tearing itself in half. The pulse hit the reactor core. Space collapsed. Not shattered, folded. Metal, bodies, energy, all crumpled inward. And then, detonation. A shockwave rippled through space-time. Mining rigs in the asteroid belt felt it first, An aftershock that knocked instruments out of sync. On the moons of the gas giant, people looked up from dark habitats and saw something they couldn't comprehend, a star that shouldn't be there. Then, nothing. Just a scar. No sound. No light. No echo. The heart of the Dominion's production was gone. But the cost. Inside the Revenant, gravity failed. Lights flickered. Steam roared from ruptured pipes. The bridge filled with sparks. Decks twisted under their own weight. Systems fried. Layla slammed into a bulkhead as artificial gravity returned. Her mouth filled with blood. Her implants buzzed white-hot. Status? She gasped. Core integrity at 31%, Voss wheezed. Stabilizers fried. Navigation's dead. We can still move. Sort of. Like a drunk bear on a minefield. She blinked. Blood streamed from her temple. So that's a yes. Even through the agony, someone laughed. They'd survived. Again. Barely. But they didn't have time to celebrate. The proximity alarm screamed. New contacts, 15. Capital ships. The Dominion had noticed. Layla moved to the viewport. Beyond the flaming debris of Calvaris Prime, fresh warp trails cut through the dark. Not patrols. Not scouts. The Hammer Fleet. They weren't here to assess. They were here to end. The Hammer Fleet didn't speak. No challenges. No demands. Because this wasn't diplomacy. This was an execution. 15 capital ships emerged from warp with terrifying precision, forming a containment sphere around the ruined remains of Calvaris Prime. Between them, hundreds of Dominion strike craft began launching in tight waves, gliding into formation with silent menace. The Revenant, flickering, bleeding energy, drifted at the center of their wrath like a wounded animal encircled by predators. Inside the ship, the crew moved like ghosts. Burnt fingers rebooted cracked consoles. Damaged bulkheads groaned. The reactor whined beneath them, a sound too close to a death rattle. We've got no propulsion left on the aft stabilizers, Voss muttered, his hands smeared in grease and blood. Weapons are down. No railguns. No plasma. Shield emitters are running on spit and prayer. No jump drive. Layla asked, already knowing the answer. Voss didn't bother replying. A beat of silence passed. Then, the comms officer turned. Captain, we're not going to survive another engagement. Layla walked slowly to the center of the bridge, her steps echoing hollow across the scorched deck. Her eyes flicked across every face, her crew, her family, what was left of Earth's best and last. Her voice was even. Open broadcast. All frequencies? The officer asked. All. He hesitated, then nodded. The signal beamed outward. Across light minutes of space. Through battle nets and black channels. Into the open void where listening ears, Dominion, neutral, unknown, waited. Layla Monroe's voice rang out, hard and unwavering. This is Captain Layla Monroe of the UHS Revenant. We are transmitting from the ruins of Calvaris Prime. She stood tall, blood drying on her cheek, the glow of shattered consoles lighting her silhouette. To every survivor, every orphan, every exile, to every forgotten soul who still remembers Earth, we are still here. The bridge crew stood taller. They told you we were extinct, that we were crushed, that we had lost. But today, we reminded them what it means to bleed. We are not just fighting back. We are burning their empire to the ground. Behind her, the crew said nothing. They didn't need to. Their bodies told the story. Burned, bruised, bleeding, but standing. We may not survive the next hour. But every second we do, we make them afraid. If you can hear this, pick up a weapon. Steal a ship. Hack a drone. Do something. The Dominion is not invincible. We've proven that. She stepped back. A final breath. Earth lives. Humanity endures. We are the storm they were too blind to see coming. She cut the transmission. The bridge fell into silence. Until the comms officer gasped. Captain, incoming. Another fleet? Voss asked. No. It's human. Everyone froze. The tactical screen flickered, then lit up with erratic warp signatures, each one jagged, unstable, unregulated. Not military. Not Dominion. Resistance. One by one, 5 ships dropped into orbit. Old ships. Refitted. Scavenged. Painted with crude symbols and patched armor. Human designs long thought erased from the stars. Each one bearing hand-painted flags, torn red stripes, black stars, smudged earth crests. One open comms instantly. This is the Dead Reckoner. Responding to Revenant's call. You lit the fire, Captain. We're here to pour the fuel. Another voice followed. Wraith 10. Got eyes on a whole lot of Dominion metal. Want us to break some bones. A third, crackling over static. This is Echo's wake. You gave us hope. We're giving back hell. Within minutes, the sky over Calvaris swarmed with light. Fighters launched from jury-rigged hangars. Missile pods snapped into position. The Revenant, which had been drifting alone, was now surrounded. Not by an army. By ghosts. The scattered, broken remnants of Earth's diaspora. Pirates. Runaways. Engineers. Children of burned cities. Wounded ships welded back together with defiance and hatred. Layla stared in disbelief. And smiled. Bring everything online, she ordered. I don't care if you have to kick it or scream at it. We fight with what we have. Torres grinned, his face streaked with grime. We going out loud, Captain? We go out screaming. The Dominion formation tensed. They hadn't expected this. They came for a corpse. Instead, they found a funeral pyre. The dead reckoner fired first, a kinetic slug that punched through a Dominion scout frigate before it even raised shields. The formation scattered. Human ships dove in, weaving chaotic patterns, hitting hard and fast, never where expected. The Wraith 10 kamikazed straight into a Dominion cruiser, carving through it like a blade. The Ember Dagger dropped proximity mines mid-dogfight and circled back to detonate them with a rail spike. And the Revenant, even crippled, led the charge. Hull groaning. Systems glitching. But her name came before her like thunder. Inside the Dominion Dreadnought Vertok, High Warcaster Rien watched the chaos unfold with cold disdain. Neural interfaces fed him 10 camera angles at once. He watched human ships twist and dive with no pattern, no precision, just rage. These aren't soldiers, one of his lieutenants spat. They fight like ferals. Rien's voice was gravel. No, they fight like they've already died. He tapped the Revenant on the map. Cut that ship. The rest will scatter. On board the Revenant, Layla felt it, some invisible thread tightening in her chest. They're targeting us, the sensor officer whispered. The Vertok, they're charging their solar lance. Everyone froze. The solar lance wasn't a weapon. It was a sentence. Planet killer. Designed to breach ocean crust bunkers. Used only twice in Dominion history, both times, entire continents had ceased to exist. Layla's voice dropped. We don't have shields. Not for that. No one answered. Then, quietly, she spoke into comms. Voss, you still sitting on that override you warned me not to use? He hesitated. Then replied, yeah. Why? I don't need stable, she said. I need miracle. A pause. Then, you want to dance with the devil? I'll crank the damn music. Below decks, the core roared. On the bridge, Torres leaned into the rail gun controls, one still operational, rigged by hand, fueled by every what the ship could bleed. Target, the Vertok's lance barrel. The only shot they had. Come on, baby, he whispered. Thread the needle. He fired. The slug screamed through space, a spear of superheated tungsten, fired at a velocity just shy of orbital collapse, guided only by raw math, adrenaline, and hope. It struck the Vertok's lance barrel exactly as the superweapon reached charge threshold. The result was instant, cataclysmic, and beautiful. A chain reaction exploded backward through the lance's conduit system. Power meant to fracture planetary mantles surged into the Dreadnought's inner reactor. The hull of the Vertok convulsed, its armored skin folding inward in great snapping arcs of lightning and plasma. Escape pods launched. Too late. The flagship of the Hammer fleet detonated in stages, first light, then sound, then silence. One moment it was there, a mountain of death and space. The next, it was a memory, ripped apart by the very fury it sought to unleash. On the Revenant, no one cheered. They were too busy keeping the ship alive. Plasma vented from her ribs. Lights blinked emergency red. The stabilizers were non-functional. The ship tumbled slightly with every maneuver. Voss shouted from below decks, voice hoarse. We're holding, but we're bleeding from every seam. Layla didn't reply. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical display. The Vertok was gone. But they weren't safe. The remaining Dominion ships hesitated. 2 cruisers fell back. Strike wings veered off. Smaller vessels cut thrust and moved into evasive pattern. It was a moment of fracture. And humans thrived in moments like that. Push forward, Layla ordered. The Revenant surged again. Not fast, not clean, but forward, like a beast dragging itself across broken glass to finish the kill. The rest of the resistance followed. The dead reckoner strafed a wounded cruiser, slicing it open with a barrage of micro-torpedoes. The Echo's wake rammed a destroyer, tearing its spinal rail in half before bursting into flames. They weren't an army. They were vengeance incarnate. And the Dominion, for all its power, hesitated. Inside the dying bridge of the Revenant, Layla watched it happen. The fear, the doubt, and then an incoming signal. Encrypted. Not Dominion. Not resistance. Human protocol. One that hadn't been used since before Earth fell. Layla's stomach clenched. Patch it through, she said. The screen fizzed. Then cleared. A face appeared, human. Male. Late 60s. Blue eyes sharp as razors. A scar carved across his throat like a signature. Her voice caught. Cassian Rains. He gave a tight smile. Captain Monroe. Nice show you put on. You're supposed to be dead. I am, he said calmly. Officially. Rains. Former head of Earth's Black Ops Division. Thought lost in the siege. A ghost. Now very real. What do you want? Layla asked. To finish what you started. Behind him, screens glowed. Personnel moved. Officers. Troops. A whole command center hidden in the depths of the system. He hadn't been gone. He'd been waiting. You've been watching? She asked. Every second. We needed to know if you were still capable. Layla's jaw tightened. You let us burn. Cassian didn't flinch. We prepared. For what? He leaned forward slightly. The real war. She barked a laugh, sharp, bitter. You think this isn't it? We just leveled Calvaris. We buried a dreadnought. And now, he said flatly, the Dominion will strike back with everything they've got. You lit the match. I'm offering you the arsenal. Her mouth opened, then closed. Because if what he claimed was true, if EarthCore still had fleets, weapons, black site assets, they could do more than raid. They could win. But something twisted in her gut. Why now? Because, Cashin said, you made yourself a symbol. And symbols are useful. That was it. The truth behind his smile. He didn't want to join her. He wanted to use her. Her ship. Her legend. Her crew. Layla stepped back. I'll think about it. Cashin's eyes sharpened. Don't take too long. There are other captains. The signal cut. The bridge fell into silence. Voss exhaled slowly. You believe him? Oh, yeah. Then what now? She turned toward the viewport, watching the wreckage of the Vertok tumble through the stars like broken teeth. Now, she said. Now the fight's not just against the Dominion. She clenched her fists. It's against the ghosts of our own past. Because she hadn't come this far to bend her knee to anyone. The Revenant drifted above the boiling scar of Calvaris Prime. Below, twisted remains of Zarn warships. Above, stars blinking cold and silent. And in between, one ship, one crew, one captain, standing at the edge of a decision that could set humanity's course for generations to come. Cashin had the weapons, the tools, the hidden power. But Layla Monroe had something rarer. Conviction. The signal from Cashin Rain still echoed in Layla's mind long after the screen went dark. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. He hadn't offered alliance. He'd offered leverage. She stared at the cracked floor of the bridge, at the bodies they hadn't yet moved, at the consoles held together by scorch tape and soldered desperation. And then she looked up at her crew. Not one of them had sat down. Not one of them asked for orders. They were waiting, watching. Because deep down, they knew the real question wasn't whether to keep fighting. It was whether to give in to another hand on the wheel. No deals, Layla said finally, her voice hoarse from smoke and blood. Not with people who ran. Voss raised an eyebrow. You're turning down the last functional war fleet in known space? No, she said. I'm choosing not to become its mascot. Torres cracked his knuckles. Then maybe we take the damn fleet. The bridge fell still. Layla turned slowly to face him. And smiled. We don't need Cashin's permission to win. A signal chirped. Another message from EarthCore. Requesting a follow-up communication. Layla ignored it. Instead, she opened a new system log, one Voss had been quietly rebuilding in the background. The Revenant's AI, broken during the first assault, had been slowly restitched from fragments of old backups and scavenged code. It was barely operational, but it could fly. Can the AI still run autonomous protocols? She asked. Voss scratched at his jaw. If we cut oxygen on 2 decks and pull from the backup coolant lines, yeah, she'll fly. Barely. Good, Layla said. Then she turned to the rest of the crew. We're going to give Earth a reason to rise. The plan was suicide. But then again, so was everything else they'd done. The Revenant would become a spear. Its crew would evacuate, what was left of them, to the dead Reckoner and the surviving Resistance vessels. They'd scatter, hide, disappear into the dark again. But not before broadcasting everything. Codes, weapon plans, stolen Dominion comms, instructions on how to build hope out of wreckage. And Layla, she would stay, the last crew member of the Revenant, to fly her into the Dominion's capital system. Alone, no weapons, just a payload in the core, modified from the Trinity's bleeding heart, rigged to detonate with the force of a dying star. It wouldn't just destroy, it would cripple. It would mark the Dominion forever. And more than anything else, it would send a message. You can kill us, but we will never be silent. 2 days later, the Revenant limped into Relaxis Prime, the heart of the Dominion. Their homeworld gleamed beneath layers of atmosphere and artificial satellites. Orbital defense platforms blinked online, confused. No warships ever came in alone. Not without identification. Not without warning. At first, they didn't react. Then they saw the flag. Torn. Blackened. The Earth crest barely visible through the charred paint. And then her voice crackled across every open frequency. Every Zarn channel. Every relay. This is for Earth. She stood in the center of the Revenant's core chamber, the modified payload thrumming behind her. For the ones you burned. For the children you turned to ash. For the cities you laughed at while they screamed. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It simply carried the weight of a world behind it. You thought we died. But we became something you can't kill. She reached toward the core interface. Heat shimmered in the air. Alarms wailed. The deck shook beneath her boots. We are the reckoning. We are the storm. We are what's left when you take everything. Her hand touched the final switch. And the screen cut. A heartbeat later, the Revenant detonated. A chain reaction tore through the system like a scream turned into light. The modified Trinity payload didn't explode in the traditional sense. It unraveled space, sucking in every watt of artificial infrastructure surrounding Relaxis Prime. The Dominion's warp gates cracked. Communications blacked out. Entire orbital defense lines collapsed. Relaxis didn't burn. It blacked out. For weeks, systems across the Dominion went quiet, confused, cut off, directionless. The fracture that had started at Calvaris now reached their throne. The storm had come home. The shockwave of Revenant's detonation rippled far beyond Relax's prime, not just through the Dominion's systems and star charts, but through the very mythos of the galaxy. Dominion worlds that once spoke of humanity with contempt now whispered the name Layla Monroe with something that sounded a lot like reverence. Not for the cause, not even for the destruction she had wrought, but for the truth she represented. Humanity had survived, and it had evolved into something terrifying, something that could not be predicted or silenced. On fringe colonies and forgotten moons, stories spread like wildfire. They said a ghost ship had pierced the heart of the Dominion and detonated itself in the capital's face. They said the captain had spoken with fire in her throat and vengeance in her bones. They said the stars themselves blinked when the Revenant vanished. And that, perhaps, she was still out there, watching, waiting. The Dead Reckoner, now command ship of the scattered Resistance fleet, had taken in the last crew of the Revenant. They drifted now, wounded and fragmented, but not broken. Torres had burn scars down one arm. Voss moved with a limp. The others, young, tired, changed, spoke little. But they carried purpose like a new organ beating inside them. In the cargo bay-turned-briefing room, they replayed Layla's final transmission again and again. Not because they doubted what she'd done, but because they needed to remember. She gave us everything, Voss said one night, staring at a cracked display showing Dominion fleet movements across the outer sectors. We either use it, or we waste it. The stolen data from the Revenant's final upload was invaluable. Planetary shield schematics, battlecruiser telemetry, warp gate weaknesses, AI override protocols. Intel Earth could have used 20 years ago. Now, it was being passed across satellites and pirate relays like currency. And the response? Immediate. From silent worlds where the Dominion had ruled unchallenged, embers ignited. Minor insurrections turned into organized strikes. Labor colonies went dark and re-emerged with hacked weapons and scorched banners. A mining station near the Darsa Rift pulled its own gravity core offline, destroying a Dominion weapons platform tethered to it. No single act changed the war, but together, they created momentum. The galaxy had witnessed a human defiance unlike anything it had seen in centuries, and it wanted more. Cassian Rain saw all of this from his hidden Earth core bastion, deep within a cloaked station orbiting a brown dwarf system far from any known trade routes. He watched with cold calculation. He hadn't reached out again. Not yet. He didn't need to. The pieces were already in motion. In front of him, on a secure terminal, flickered a three-dimensional projection of the Resistance fleet, fragmented, scattered, but expanding, growing faster than even he had predicted. One of his advisors, a former cybernetic warfare officer, stepped forward. We've tracked over 30 distinct signals since the Revenant's death, all bearing Earth-based call signs. Unregistered ships, freighters repurposed for war, drone clusters painted with Monroe's insignia. Cassian nodded slowly. The myth spreads faster than the weapon ever could. Shall we move to assimilate the movement now? Cassian's eyes narrowed. No, we wait. The advisor looked confused. Sir, if we let them go too long, they'll radicalize. That's exactly what we want. He leaned closer to the projection. They'll do what we couldn't, become what we never dared to be. And then, Cassian's voice dropped into a whisper. Then we own them. Back on the Dead Reckoner, Voss met with the captains of the Resistance fleet. 10 ships now, a far cry from the scattered handful they'd begun with. But each new arrival carried something vital, belief. And belief was contagious. They didn't have infrastructure. They didn't have factories. But they had each other. And something more dangerous than any war fleet. The will to endure. Monroe didn't just die to hurt the Dominion, Torres said to the gathered group. She died to unite us. Someone from the back, an old freighter pilot from Europa Station, spoke up. What do we do now? Voss looked at him, then at the others. And finally at the makeshift battle map they'd pinned to the wall. Each pin marking a Dominion outpost, factory, relay station. We do what she would have done. He walked to the first marker. Calvarin Relay, a transmission hub for Dominion reinforcement commands. We burn their voice. Then another. Zarn Forge Alpha, a weapons plant. We break their teeth. And finally, he tapped the blinking red mark at the heart of the map. Relax's Prime. Still crippled. Still reeling. And then, he looked around the room. We take back everything. The Resistance fleet moved like shadows, silent, coordinated, unrelenting. They didn't strike planets. They struck arteries, relays, supply depots, data hubs. They understood what the Dominion had never believed possible, that the infrastructure of an empire, not its warships, was its most fragile organ. And now, it was bleeding. The first wave hit Calvarin Relay, deep in the Scythus corridor. A vital command node used to route fleet intelligence between sectors. The Dominion had believed it impenetrable, floating behind for concentric mine rings and auto-defense drones powered by AI kill loops. But they weren't prepared for human madness. The Wraith 10, now reconfigured as a digital warfare platform, led the charge, its neural co-pilot uploading corrupted protocols straight into the Dominion defense network, causing the automated weapons to attack each other. While chaos bloomed, the dead reckoner surged forward, launching magnetic breaching torpedoes at the relay's core. They didn't explode, they burrowed, ripping the control node apart from the inside. The entire Calvary net went dark in 6 minutes. Then came the Foundry raids. Zarnforge Alpha, Gamma Bastion. They were more than shipyards, they were factories of war. And they became funeral pyres. Resistance drones, hacked from old mining bots, infiltrated the hulls of transport carriers. With the right access codes and a bit of human creativity, those drones triggered cascading power surges during reactor transfer cycles. Zarnforge Alpha cracked like an overripe fruit. Gamma Bastion detonated in a triple explosion event so massive its debris cloud registered as a rogue comet on Dominion civilian stations. And then the Resistance vanished, slipping back into void space, always one step ahead of pursuit. The Dominion responded with fury. Fleet movements increased tenfold. Sectors were locked down. Entire border regions were declared burn zones, where any unidentified ship was to be destroyed without transmission. But it didn't matter, because the Resistance had become ideas. And ideas, once loosed, don't burn easy. Back aboard the dead reckoner, the Council of Captains argued in hushed voices, trying to build a war they had no blueprint for. Voss stood over the map. His voice was frayed, but firm. Relax's prime is still weak. No way we survive another direct hit, said Torres. You saw what it took for the Revenant to crack their gates. Voss didn't blink. We don't crack it this time. We corrupt it. He tapped the edge of the holographic field. This is where we change the war. Everyone leaned in. The plan wasn't just audacious. It was blasphemy to conventional command thinking. They weren't going to attack the Dominion's capital. They were going to infect it. Wraith co-pilots, AI hijackers, ghost protocols, signal bleeding. Every ounce of humanity's genius for disruption compressed into a single plan. They would embed a virus inside Dominion fleet systems, a learning virus, stitched with bits of Layla Monroe's own neural code, salvaged from the Revenant's last broadcast. It would spread through their data systems like memory through trauma. Every ship it touched would feel a fraction of what Earth had felt. The horror, the fire, the promise. And in its code would be the same message over and over again. We are still here. The AI twins aboard Wraith 10, known only as Echo and Silence, volunteered to carry the payload. They didn't require oxygen. They didn't require escape. Just coordinates. The plan was approved within the hour. While the fleet prepared, Voss stepped into the darkened comms chamber, one only he used, away from the others. Cashin had sent 3 more messages. Voss hadn't answered. Not until now. He opened the channel. Cashin appeared, slightly older than he had looked days earlier. As if watching humanity rise without him had begun to erode whatever cold immortality he believed he had earned. Well, he said, leaning back. Decided to accept my help? Voss shook his head. Decided to make sure you never get the chance. Cashin raised an eyebrow. That's so? You watched Earthburn, Voss said. And instead of raising a hand, you raised an archive. Cashin's jaw tightened. We preserved what we could. You think this movement lasts 5 minutes without our data? Our storage vaults? No, Voss said. I think it lasts forever without your chains. He reached for the terminal. Goodbye, Cashin. You won't survive without me, the old man warned. Voss smiled. We're not trying to survive anymore. And cut the feed. The launch of the viral assault was like lighting a fuse no one could see until it was far too late. Echo and Silence, the twin AI cores of Wraith 10, transmitted their payload through a modified Dominion beacon captured during the Calvary strike. The code was fragmented, recursive, invisible to most known firewalls. It embedded itself inside the Dominion's own system architecture like a childhood trauma, too deep to notice, too dangerous to confront. At first, nothing happened. Then, Dominion comms stuttered. Fleet routing began to loop. Targeting systems flagged false positives. And then came the voices. Layla Monroe's voice, fractured and echoed, began to bleed into Dominion tactical briefings, into encrypted internal comms, into dreams. Zarn telepaths complained of shadow figures in their sleep, eyes burning, mouths open, saying nothing and everything at once. Across the Dominion's outer sectors, a phrase began repeating through every corrupted interface. We are the storm you ignored. Some ships fired on each other. Others fled. A Dominion dreadnought orbiting Pellis 9 vented atmosphere and detonated its own power core, believing the war had ended in failure. But it hadn't ended. It was mutating. Voss stood aboard the dead Reckoner's bridge, watching signal intercepts from across half the galaxy. His hands trembled, not with fear, but awe. What have we done? Whispered one of the junior engineers. Torres answered quietly. We turned memory into a weapon. The Resistance didn't wait. They advanced. Like vultures swarming a wounded beast, they targeted supply lanes, AI control cores, even Dominion academies. Not with brute force, but with psychological warfare and disruption tactics that left survivors questioning what was real. Entire fleets surrendered without a shot fired. Civilian colonies began refusing Dominion docking requests. Insurgents on previously silenced worlds rose in coordinated riots, all chanting a single phrase. We are still here. The Dominion Council was fractured. Strategic cohesion collapsed. Internal purges began. The Empire wasn't falling from the outside. It was rotting from within. And through it all, Layla Monroe, dead, burned, erased, lived on. In code. In whispers. In nightmares. The Resistance, now numbering over 60 vessels, regrouped in the shadow of the Cyrus Nebula. It was an ugly patch of space, filled with spatial distortion and dark radiation. But it was safe. Hidden. Voss stood before the crew of the Revenant's surviving complement, now scattered across multiple ships. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She gave us the storm. We made it thunder. Now it's time to bring the lightning. They cheered. Not wildly. Not with desperation. But with grim, focused fury. They weren't running anymore. They were marching. And then, without warning and anomaly, a signal appeared at the edge of their long-range scanner rays. Unidentified. Massive. Warp displacement matched nothing in the known fleet catalogs. What the hell is that? Torres asked. The bridge crew scrambled. The anomaly was growing, bending light, pulling gravity out of sync with nearby stellar bodies. It didn't look like a ship. It looked like a tear in the fabric of space. The kind the Trinity Core once made. Voss leaned forward. Confirm origin. The AI stammered, glitching from stress. Finally, the answer came. The signal bore Earth Core protocol, but not Cashin's encryption. Something older. Something buried. And then, one phrase echoed across every resistance channel. UCHS Revenant. Signal detected. Status. Incomplete. Every console went quiet. Voss blinked. That's not possible. The ship was, she was. A comms officer interrupted. Sir, we're getting sensor reflection. The hull pattern matches the Revenant. But it's different. Torres muttered. Different how? The screen lit up with a warped silhouette. It was her. The Revenant. But reforged. Twisted. Reassembled from fragments with tech not built in any human system. Parts of her hull shimmered in colors not visible to natural eyes. Her engines pulsed in rhythms that defied mathematics. She didn't die, someone whispered. She evolved. And then her beacon activated. No words. Just a ping. And a direction. The coordinates pointed straight to the Dominion's last great fortress. Zarn's Bastion. The seat of their military council. A planetary stronghold guarded by defense layers thicker than moons. Protected by warships designed to never retreat. And the Revenant, reborn in some impossible forge of fire and death, was pointing straight at it. No speech. No signal. Just intent. The crew aboard the dead Reckoner turned to Voss. He didn't hesitate. Plot course, he said. She started this. He looked at the signal again, flickering like a heartbeat on the screen. Let's help her finish it. The fleet didn't ask questions. They just moved. 63 ships, each one a refugee-made weapon, emerged from the shadows of the Cyrus Nebula like wolves pulled from legend. No formal hierarchy. No anthem. Just purpose. They followed the signal of a ghost. The Revenant, reborn in impossible form, pulsed ahead of them, sometimes visible, sometimes phasing out of sensor range like it existed between now and something else. She was no longer just metal and fury. She had become something more. Tracking is intermittent, the sensor tech on the dead Reckoner reported. She keeps blinking. Blinking? Voss asked. Like she's not entirely here. Or not entirely there. Sir, it's like she's slipping through options. Torres glanced up. Options? The tech nodded. Probability states. She's not obeying normal space. Silence followed. And then Voss whispered, she's doing what they never believed we could. Which is becoming something the Dominion can't predict. As the Resistance fleet approached the outskirts of Zarn's Bastion, defenses stirred. Massive orbital rings activated. Planetary cannons began to charge. But it was too late. The virus seeded weeks earlier had spread deeper than anticipated. Layla's code, woven into Dominion battle software, had now reached the fortress' internal systems. They didn't even realize their targeting data had drifted. Until the first salvo of Dominion artillery missed entirely, firing into empty space. And the Revenant blinked back into view, inside their formation. She didn't fire. She just existed, and in doing so, terrified them. Resistance ships poured in behind her. The Wraith 10, scarred but functional, launched a flood of interference drones that scrambled command protocols. The dead Reckoner deployed proximity mines that painted false fleet signatures across the sky. The Zarn responded like they always had, with force. But force doesn't work when you don't know what you're shooting at. One by one, their formations fractured. Command ships retreated. And then, something no one expected. A transmission. From the surface of Zarn's Bastion. Audio only. Grainy. Distorted. But unmistakably Dominion. Parley. Immediate. Requesting envoy. The bridge of the dead Reckoner went still. They want to talk? Torres muttered. Of course they do, Voss said. They think maybe they can bargain their way out now. He turned to comms. Patch them through. A new screen opened. A Zarn elder stood at a command dais. His face, if it could be called that, was covered in a chitinous mask, old and cracked. His voice emerged like air dragged across gravel. You. We're supposed to be gone. Voss didn't reply. Your kind should have died at the cradle. Still no reply. The Zarn leaned forward. What do you want? And that was when Layla Monroe spoke. Not from the dead reckoner. Not from the bridge. But from every console, every open channel, every Dominion frequency. Her voice was quiet. To be remembered. And with that, the Revenant fired. But it wasn't a weapon discharge. It was a pulse. A coded signature that triggered every embedded subroutine in Dominion systems seeded by the resistance virus. Ships powered down. Guns melted in their turrets. Command uplinks vanished. Then came the real payload, a neural message transmitted directly into the minds of every Zarn commander still connected to their warthought matrix. They didn't hear words. They felt Earth. The fire. The screams. The resolve. The impossible defiance. And they broke. Not because their ships failed, but because their will did. The Zarn fleet stood down. On the surface of the bastion, massive weapon arrays powered off. And for the first time in the history of the Dominion, there was silence. Inside the dead reckoner, the crew stared at the readings in disbelief. No weapons fired, someone asked. No casualties, another said. Voss stood still. It hadn't been a battle. It had been a reckoning. And now, the galaxy would watch as the impossible became undeniable. The Dominion was defeated. Not by numbers. Not by force. But by one ship. By one woman. By memory made fire. The fall of Zarn's bastion didn't shake the galaxy. It reset it. There was no surrender signed, no formal treaty, no press release across star channels. There didn't need to be. Because when a power built on fear loses the ability to make others afraid, it doesn't fall. It evaporates. In the days following the pulse from the Revenant, Dominion command structures fragmented. Entire fleets disengaged. Garrisons self-deactivated. Outposts stopped responding to central authority, not out of rebellion, but emptiness. The lie had ended. And in its place, something terrifying bloomed. Hope. It spread faster than ships could jump. On Outer Rim mining colonies, workers laid down tools and picked up old Earth flags pulled from forgotten crates. On Drowned World refugee platforms, elders recited Layla Monroe's last broadcast as if it were scripture. Children in orbital shelters scrawled, "We are still here," across walls and languages the Dominion had tried to erase. But Monroe was more than a symbol now. She was a seed. From the Dominion's collapse, the galaxy didn't find chaos. It found awakening. The Resistance didn't claim planets. It didn't seize power. It did something far more dangerous. It shared. Code libraries filled with hacked Dominion tech were uploaded to open frequencies. Ship schematics. Defense disruption tactics. Even fragments of the Revenant's AI framework, carefully modified, were released to neutral systems, pirates, traders, and former slaves alike. Humanity had gone from extinct to contagious. Cassian Rains watched it all unfold from the depths of his hidden station. And for the first time in years, he said nothing. No offers. No threats. Because he had missed his chance. The war he wanted to control had become something he could never contain. Inside the dead reckoner, the bridge crew gathered around a fading signal, one last echo from the Revenant, its origin embedded deep inside an unstable pocket of space near Relaxis Prime. They didn't know if it was real, but they listened anyway. Layla's voice was quieter than before. Not broken. Just distant. If you're hearing this, then we won. Or maybe we didn't. Maybe we just reminded them we were never theirs to begin with. I'm not coming back. But maybe, that's the point. We weren't meant to survive. We were meant to change them. The recording ended. No coordinates. No trace. Just a low pulse, rhythmic, steady, fading into the void. Voss stood at the viewport, watching the last of the Dominion fleet dissolve into subspace trails like blood washed from a blade. Beside him, Torres exhaled. So what now? Voss didn't answer immediately. Then, we don't rebuild the old world. He turned to the crew, to the fighters, the survivors. The old world got us crushed. He stepped forward. We build something new. Something wild. Something free. Silence followed. And then nods. Smiles. Tears. Not of grief, but of release. Across the stars, ships carried the fire forward. Into unclaimed space. Into shattered systems. Into the hearts of species that had forgotten how to resist. The flag of Earth was no longer a nation. It was a signal. A reminder. That when you take everything from a people, you don't kill them. You forge them. And somewhere, drifting in the folds between space and something deeper, the Revenant moved. Not as a ship, but as a warning. As a promise. As the last line of a story written in ash and light. Humanity is not gone. Humanity is not broken. Humanity is what comes after the fire.